Finally, someone only paid for their own meal. Now on the surface, that sentence might not sound earth-shattering. But let me tell you, when you grow up in a family where splitting the bill evenly is treated like sacred tradition, no matter who ordered what, those 6 words feel like rebellion. They feel like a revolution. Because here's the thing, family dinners for me were never just let's grab a bite together. No. They were battlegrounds disguised as celebrations. Imagine sitting at a long restaurant table, your cousins giggling over cocktails, your aunt happily browsing the dessert menu, your uncle ordering the most expensive steak on the list, while you're quietly sitting there with a simple burger and water. And then, boom. The bill hits the table, and suddenly, you're paying for all of it. And what's worse? Nobody batted an eye. Nobody even considered it strange. It was tradition. It was family. And as the youngest, the quiet one, I never dared question it. But inside, it burned. Every single dinner, I felt this knot in my chest, like I was carrying a burden that wasn't mine. I'd sit there calculating in my head, okay, my burger was $9, my water was free, but I just paid $40. How does that even make sense? And still, I kept my mouth shut, telling myself, don't rock the boat. Don't cause drama. I'll admit, I thought I was the problem. Like maybe I was being selfish for even thinking about fairness when family bonding was supposed to matter more. But then something happened, something small but monumental, that changed everything. Tea was one of those dinners, the same routine, but this time, one person decided they weren't going to play along. They didn't yell. They didn't make a scene. They just looked at the waiter and said 7 words that flipped my world upside down. Can I get a separate check, please? And let me tell you, when those words left their mouth, it was like someone dropped a grenade on the table. The silence that followed, deafening. My aunt's jaw literally dropped. Someone muttered cheap under their breath. My uncle glared. And me? I sat there frozen, watching this little miracle unfold. Because for the first time ever someone, finally, only paid for their own meal. And in that moment, it was like they cracked open a door I'd been too scared to touch. A door that said, hey, you don't have to go along with this nonsense. You can stand up for yourself too. That one moment shifted everything. And looking back, I realize, it wasn't just about money. It was about power. About boundaries. About finally breaking free from a tradition that honestly was never fair in the first place. And if you've ever been in a situation where you felt stuck, where you kept quiet just to avoid conflict, you'll understand exactly why that moment meant so much. Now don't worry, I'm going to walk you through all of it. The chaos of those family dinners. The years of quiet resentment. And the jaw-dropping night when one cousin dared to break the cycle. And trust me, the reactions? Oh, you're not ready. But before we dive deeper into the story, let me just say this. Putting together these kinds of stories takes a lot of work. And if you enjoy hearing wild, real-life dramas like this one, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. It's free, it keeps me motivated, and it means I can keep bringing you the next unbelievable story. Oh, buckle up. Because this isn't just about food or money. It's about finally breaking free from traditions that never should have been traditions in the first place. When I tell you that family dinners growing up were chaos, I'm not exaggerating. Picture this, a long, crowded restaurant table with relatives packed in on all sides. My aunt fussing with the menu, my uncle bragging about his refined taste, while pointing to the steak section, my cousins debating cocktails like they were judges on a TV show. And me? I'd be sitting quietly at the corner, pretending to study the menu even though I already knew what I'd get. Something cheap, something safe, something that wouldn't make me wince when the bill finally came. Now, here's the thing. For most people, going out to dinner with family is a treat. You laugh, you share stories, you maybe splurge a little because, hey, it's family time. But in my family, these dinners had an unspoken rule. A rule I didn't question at first because, well, I was young and I thought adults just knew best. The rule was simple. No matter what anyone ordered when the check arrived, we split it evenly. Sounds harmless, right? But let's break that down. Imagine ordering a burger and water, maybe $10 total. Meanwhile, your cousin orders steak, shrimp appetizers, a dessert sampler, and 2 cocktails. Let's say $70 worth of food and drinks. When the check arrives, guess what? You're both paying $40 each. Equal split. That means you're literally funding their expensive tastes while barely covering your own. And the wildest part? Nobody ever questioned it. It was just the way things were. My uncle would slap the check down on the table with his booming voice. "All right, let's split it evenly, everyone," and that was that. People would just nod, pull out their cards, and the waiter would dutifully divide it. Meanwhile, I'd sit there doing mental gymnastics. Okay, I ordered $12 worth of food, but I'm paying $38. That's like triple. Why am I okay with this? Why is everyone okay with this? And yet, I said nothing. Why? Because I didn't want to be that person. The one who ruined family bonding time. The one who made things awkward. See, I grew up being told that keeping the peace was more important than speaking up. That money was just money, and family was priceless. But when you're the one living paycheck to paycheck, scraping by, while other people are casually throwing back $15 cocktails, they're not the ones hurting when the check gets split. You are. And trust me, it hurt. Especially when I got older and started working my first job. Picture this, I'm making minimum wage, trying to pay rent, bills, groceries, just trying to survive. And then, every month or so, my family ropes me into one of these dinners. I try to say, "Oh, I'm not really hungry tonight," or maybe I'll just stay home. But they wouldn't hear of it. My aunt would guilt trip me. "Don't be silly, it's family tradition. You can't miss it." My mom would add, "Come on, it's just dinner. Don't make a fuss." So I'd go. I'd sit. I'd order something tiny. Because that's all I could afford. And then the bill would come, and there it was again. My $12 meal magically turned into $40 or $50. Sometimes even more if they went wild that night. And you know what the worst part was? They acted like it was generous to split it evenly. Like it was some noble, selfless act. Isn't it so nice? Nobody has to fuss about math. We all just share together as family. Meanwhile, I'm dying inside thinking, yeah, but some of us are sharing way more than others. But still, I kept my mouth shut. Because, honestly, who wants to be labeled cheap? Who wants to be the killjoy that ruins the fun? And yet, every single time, that resentment built up a little more. I'd walk home from those dinners with this heavy pit in my stomach, not just from the food, but from the unfairness of it all. I wanted to scream, "This isn't fair. Why am I paying for your wine? Why am I paying for your steak when I couldn't even afford to order one for myself?" But instead, I smiled, paid my share, and pretended everything was fine. Looking back, I realize it wasn't just about the money. It was about power. The older relatives set the rules, and nobody dared break them. The cousins followed along because, honestly, they benefited. And me? I was the odd one out, the one who suffered silently while everyone else thrived in this so-called tradition. And maybe you're wondering, okay, but why didn't you just refuse? Why not put your foot down? Well, here's the truth. In families like mine, refusing isn't just about money. It's about loyalty. It's about being branded as selfish or ungrateful. And once that label sticks, good luck ever shaking it, so I played along. For years. Until one night, at a birthday dinner, something happened that would completely shatter that tradition. But before I get to that moment, let me ask you something. Be honest, if your family or partner did this to you, if they constantly made you pay more than your fair share under the guise of tradition, would you put up with it to keep the peace? Or would you speak up, even if it meant causing drama? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I really want to know where you stand, so fast forward with me to the night everything shifted, my aunt's birthday dinner. Now if you know my family, you know birthdays were huge. Not in a let's throw a big party kind of way, but in a let's all go out to the fanciest restaurant in town and order like we own the place kind of way. And because it was my aunt, the queen of tradition, you better believe the expectations were sky high. I remember walking into the restaurant that night, already dreading what was coming. The place was upscale, dim lighting, soft jazz playing in the background, waiters in crisp white shirts gliding past like they were floating. I could practically smell the money in the air. And my first thought was, great. This is going to hurt. Sure enough, the ordering began, and it was like watching a slow-motion train wreck. My cousins flipped to the back of the menu, straight to the pricey sections. One ordered a round of cocktails. Make it 2 each, we're celebrating. Another cousin? I'll start with a seafood platter. My uncle? Bring us your best bottle of red wine. And me? I kept my eyes glued to the cheapest entree on the menu. A small pasta dish. No drinks, no appetizers. Just pasta and water. Because, let's be real, I knew how this night would end. The table was buzzing with laughter and chatter, everyone basking in the glow of indulgence. Meanwhile, I sat there, half listening, half calculating in my head. Okay, if they split evenly again, and the bill comes to, say, $600, that's like $75 each. My pasta is $14. This is insane. But I kept my face neutral. Because that's what I always did. And then the food came. Plates clattered onto the table like trophies. Steak sizzling, shrimp gleaming, cocktails sparkling under the dim light. My little plate of pasta looked almost comical next to the mountain of food everyone else had. But the real show didn't start until the end of the night. The plates were cleared, the wine bottle empty, the laughter starting to fade. And then, it happened. The moment I dreaded. The waiter arrived with the bill. My uncle leaned back in his chair, patting his stomach like a king who'd just feasted. He looked around the table with a smug smile and said the words I knew were coming. All right, let's split it evenly. And just like that, everyone started reaching for their wallets. It was automatic, like muscle memory. Nobody questioned it. Nobody even looked at the bill. They just knew the drill. Except, this time, something different happened. One of my cousins, let's call him David, hesitated. He didn't reach for his wallet right away. Instead, he glanced at the bill, then at the table, then back at the waiter. And with the calmest voice I've ever heard, he said, "Actually, can I get a separate check?" I swear, the air got sucked out of the room. The table went dead silent. Forks froze mid-air, glasses hovered half-raised. You could have heard a pin drop, and my aunt's face turned crimson. She blinked at him like he'd just spoken in another language. "What?" she snapped. David didn't flinch. He looked her dead in the eye and repeated, "I only ordered a plate and a drink. I'll just pay for mine." You could feel the ripple of shock wash across the table. Someone whispered cheap under their breath. My uncle frowned so hard his forehead creased like an accordion. One cousin giggled awkwardly. And me? I sat there frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. It was like watching someone walk across a minefield, slow, steady, daring the explosions to go off. My aunt finally recovered and said, dripping with sarcasm, "Really, David? You can't just join in? It's tradition." But David stayed calm. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't get defensive. He just shrugged and said, "Tradition or not, I didn't order the wine, the cocktails, the appetizers. Why should I pay for them?" Boom. There it was. The truth. Said out loud. The very thing I'd been screaming in my head for years but never dared say. And let me tell you, the tension was unbearable. My aunt huffed, muttered something about him embarrassing the family. My uncle shook his head. One cousin tried to smooth it over with a joke. But David didn't budge. The waiter, bless his soul, just nodded politely and said, "Of course, sir. I'll bring that right out." And with that, the spell was broken. The waiter returned with a separate bill, and David calmly paid his share. Watching him do that, it was surreal. Like witnessing someone break out of prison right in front of you. For the first time ever, the tradition cracked. And I realized, maybe I wasn't crazy for hating it. Maybe I wasn't selfish. Maybe I just didn't have the courage to say what David said. But here's the kicker, after David paid for his own meal, dinner kept going. Sure, it was awkward at first. People grumbled, rolled their eyes, whispered about him being stingy. But guess what? The world didn't end. The restaurant didn't collapse. My aunt didn't faint from shame. Life went on. And in that moment, I saw the truth. This whole tradition. It wasn't sacred. It wasn't untouchable. It was just a bad habit everyone went along with because nobody wanted to be the first to break it. And now, someone had I can't even describe the mix of emotions I felt. Shock, admiration, relief. But also guilt. Because deep down, I wanted to do the same thing. I wanted to grab the bill, wave the waiter over, and say, "Me too. Separate check, please." But I didn't. I sat there, silent as always, letting David carry the weight. Still, watching him gave me something I'd never had before, permission. Permission to question. Permission to say no. Permission to finally, one day, stand up for myself. But of course, that moment didn't end quietly. My family wasn't about to let this go without a fight, so we left the restaurant. The whispers started. "Can you believe him? So cheap. Doesn't care about family. My aunt practically fumed the whole way to her car. And I knew deep down, this wasn't the last I'd hear about it. Because if there's one thing families hate, it's when someone breaks tradition. Do you think David went too far here, or was this exactly the right move? I'm curious what side you're on, because trust me, my family definitely picked sides that night. Let me know what you think in the comments. After that infamous birthday dinner, things in my family didn't go back to normal. Not really. On the surface, sure, we still met up, we still ate together, we still laughed over plates of food. But there was this undercurrent, this quiet tension humming beneath every word to David's move. Asking for a separate check was like tossing a rock into still water. The ripples spread out and touched everyone. Some people pretended it hadn't happened. Some outright scorned him. And a few like me silently clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, he'd cracked open a door that couldn't be shut again. But families, especially mine, don't give up traditions without a fight. The first tactical move came quickly, shame. My aunt wasted no time making digs whenever David was around. At the very next dinner, she leaned across the table with this sweet but deadly smile and said, "Now don't worry, David, you don't have to pay for anyone else tonight. We wouldn't want you feeling burdened." Her voice dripped with sarcasm, the kind that cuts sharper than a knife. Everyone laughed awkwardly, eyes darting toward him. David didn't rise to it. He just smiled politely, ordered his usual entree, and kept his cool. That, in itself, was powerful. The second move? Isolation. I started noticing that whenever plans were made for dinners, someone would forget to mention them to David until the last minute. Or the family group chat would suddenly go silent, only for me to overhear later that they'd all gone out without him. It was subtle, but obvious. A way of punishing him for breaking rank. But here's what they didn't realize. Their moves weren't working. If anything, they made him look stronger. He wasn't caving. He wasn't groveling to be accepted again. He was living his life his way. And watching him, it was like studying a blueprint. For the first time in my life, I started questioning, why am I still playing along? Why am I the one suffering in silence when clearly, the sky doesn't fall if you stand your ground? The next few dinners became my training ground. I didn't go full David right away. No, I wasn't that brave yet. But I started making small, strategic moves of my own. For example, when everyone else was ordering cocktails, I'd casually say, "Just water for me." That wasn't unusual, but this time I added, "I'm keeping it light since I'm on a budget." A small statement, but enough to plant a seed. Another night, when the check arrived and the split evenly chance started, I hesitated just long enough for people to notice. I didn't say anything, just a pause, a little wrinkle of my brow, before pulling out my card. That hesitation? It sent a signal. I wasn't on autopilot anymore. And trust me, people noticed. The comments started rolling in. "You always order so little. Why don't you treat yourself for once? Come on, it's family tradition. Don't ruin the mood." They framed it like concern, but I knew what it was: pressure. Pressure to fall back in line. But here's the thing. Once you've seen someone else walk through the fire and survive, it's a lot harder to believe the flames will actually kill you. And that's where the shift happened. Because one night, not long after, the check landed in the middle of the table with that familiar thud. My uncle, ever the commander, gave his booming order, "All right, let's split evenly, folks." Everyone reached, everyone nodded. And me? My heart pounded so hard I swear it echoed in my ears. This was it. My moment. I looked at the waiter, took a deep breath, and said, "Actually, could I get a separate check too?" The table froze. Deja vu. The silence, the stares, the disbelief. It was all happening again, only this time, it was me at the center. Why Aunt narrowed her eyes, her lips curling into that same sarcastic smile she'd used on David. "Oh, following in your cousin's footsteps now." I swallowed hard, my palms sweaty, but I forced myself to stay calm. "I just don't think it's fair to pay for things I didn't order," I said. Simple. Direct. No drama. And just like David had done, I held my ground. The waiter nodded, no fuss, no judgment, and returned with a separate bill. I paid my $15 instead of the $60 they were all about to shell out. The tension at the table was thick enough to choke on. I could practically hear the unspoken thoughts buzzing around. Selfish, cheap, ungrateful. But underneath that, I also sensed something else. Respect. Maybe even envy. Because let's be real, Who wouldn't want to stop paying for other people's lobster and wine? From that night on, everything shifted. My family couldn't ignore it anymore. The old tradition wasn't universal. It had cracks. First David, now me. And once two people defect, others start to wonder if maybe they could too. Sure enough, a few weeks later, another cousin quietly asked for their own bill. Then another. The dominoes started to fall. Slowly but steadily. And you know what? The family dinners didn't end. They didn't implode. We still ate together, still laughed, still made memories. But the power dynamic had changed. No longer was it this unchallenged rule that everyone blindly followed. Now, it was a choice. And once people realized they had a choice, everything was different, of course. My aunt wasn't happy. She tried every tactic, snide remarks, guilt trips, even dramatic sighs about the death of family tradition. But the tide had already turned. Once the illusion of power is broken, you can't put it back together. And for me personally, it was liberating. I stopped dreading dinners. I stopped calculating unfair numbers in my head. I stopped feeling like a pushover. That simple act, asking for my own check, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd lost years ago. And maybe this sounds dramatic, but it wasn't just about food or money. It was about boundaries. It was about respect. It was about finally saying, I matter too. My needs matter. That's the real power shift, by the time my cousin David and I had both broken ranks. Family dinners were no longer the seamless productions they used to be. The unspoken rule of splitting the bill evenly was cracked wide open, and every dinner became a test. A test of loyalty. A test of patience. A test of whether people would keep playing along, or dare to resist. The turning point came a few months later at another big dinner. This time, it was my uncle's retirement party. And trust me when I say, if there was ever going to be a night where they'd enforce tradition, this was it. The restaurant was packed, the table stretched out longer than usual, and everyone came ready to celebrate. My uncle, of course, ordered the most expensive steak on the menu, paired with another top-shelf bottle of wine. My cousins went wild, appetizers, desserts, rounds of cocktails. The table looked like a feast fit for royalty. And me? I played it simple again. One entree, water, no extras. Because by now, I wasn't afraid of ordering what I could afford. I had my plan. All night long though, I could feel the tension. My aunt was watching me like a hawk. Every time I politely declined a round of drinks, she'd purse her lips. Every time I ignored the dessert menu, she'd sigh dramatically. And I just knew she was waiting for the bill. And when it came, it was almost cinematic. The waiter placed the black folder on the table with that familiar weight. My uncle snatched it up like he was performing some sacred ritual. He skimmed the total, smiled, and with his booming voice announced, "All right, everyone, let's split it evenly." The words echoed around the table, bouncing off the clinking glasses and half-empty plates. For a second, time froze. Everyone turned to look at me. Not at David this time. At me, I could feel my pulse in my throat. But I knew this was the moment. If I stayed silent, if I caved now, everything I'd built, the courage, the progress, would crumble. So I looked the waiter dead in the eye and said, calm as ever, "Actually, can I get a separate check for mine?" Silence. Again. That same heavy, suffocating silence. But this time, I didn't stop there. I turned to my family, my voice steady but firm, and said, "I love these dinners, I really do. But I can't keep paying for food I didn't order. I've got bills, responsibilities. It's not fair. So from now on, I'm just paying for myself." Gasps. Literal gasps. My aunt's face went red, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. My uncle slammed the bill folder down on the table. "This is ridiculous," he barked. "Family shares. That's what we do." But I didn't flinch. For once in my life, I didn't shrink back. "Sharing means everyone gives equally," I said. "This isn't sharing. This is me paying for your wine while I drink water." Boom. The truth was out. The table erupted. One cousin tried to laugh it off. "Come on, it's just money, don't ruin the night." Another whispered, "Cheap," under their breath. But something different happened this time. Because across the table, another cousin raised their hand timidly and said, "Actually, yeah, me too. I'll just pay for my meal." And then another. And another. Tea was like dominoes falling in slow motion. Suddenly, half the table was asking for separate checks. The waiter looked both terrified and amused, scribbling notes as quickly as possible. My aunt sputtered, my uncle raged, but it was too late. The tide had turned. For the first time in decades, the sacred tradition collapsed in front of everyone. The illusion was shattered. No longer could they pretend it was normal or fair or even fun. And here's the best part. Once the dust settled, once the separate checks were handed out and paid, the night went on. The food didn't vanish. The laughter returned. The celebration continued. Life didn't end just because we stopped splitting evenly. In fact, it was better. For the first time ever, I left a family dinner without that heavy pit in my stomach. No resentment. No bitterness. Just relief. I'd eaten my meal, paid my fair share, and walked out with money still in my pocket. And deep down, I knew I'd never go back. The cycle was broken. Okay, real talk. Do you think my family deserved this ending? Or was it too extreme to shatter a tradition like that? Should I have just kept the peace? Or was it about time someone stood up? Let's debate in the comments, because I know opinions are going to be split on this one. Walking out of that restaurant, I remember the cool night air hitting my face, and for the first time after a family dinner, I wasn't exhausted. I wasn't frustrated. I wasn't mentally calculating how much I'd lost compared to what I ate. Was _free. And you know what's wild? The world didn't collapse because I said no. My family didn't disown me. The group chat didn't explode with insults. Sure, my aunt was still salty for a while, and my uncle muttered about selfishness for weeks after. But eventually, it just became normal. The next time we had a dinner, nobody even bothered to bring up splitting evenly. The waiter asked if we wanted separate checks, and half the table nodded like it was the most natural thing in the world. And just like that, something that had once been untouchable tradition was gone. But here's the thing that really stuck with me. It was never just about the money. Tea was about the principle. About learning that silence doesn't always keep the peace. It just keeps you stuck. It was about realizing that boundaries don't destroy relationships. They redefine them. And honestly, sometimes they save them. Because think about it. How many family fights, resentments, or grudges have been built on little things that no one ever talked about? How many people are still carrying bitterness because they never spoke up? For me, all it took was one person daring to ask for a separate check. That tiny act cracked open the door for the rest of us. And that's what I want you to take from this. Tea doesn't matter if your family tradition is about splitting bills, or borrowing money, or always being the one to drive everyone around. If it feels unfair, if it drains you, if it builds resentment, you're allowed to say no. You're allowed to change the pattern. You don't have to set yourself on fire just to keep everyone else warm. Looking back, I don't regret a single second of speaking up. I regret waiting so long. I regret all the quiet dinners where I swallowed my frustration just to avoid ruining the night. Because honestly, what kind of night is it if you leave feeling worse than when you came? Now, do we still have family dinners? Yes. Are they perfect? No. But they're real. They're fair. And they no longer leave me secretly wishing I'd stayed home. And maybe, just maybe, that's what family should have been all along. So if you take anything from this story, let it be this. Standing up for yourself might make people uncomfortable in the moment, but in the long run, it's worth it. If you've ever been the quiet one at the table, the one secretly paying more than your share, I want to hear from you. Drop your story in the comments. Did you ever stand up for yourself, or are you still waiting for that moment? And hey, if you enjoyed this story and want more real-life drama, don't forget to hit subscribe. It's free, it supports the channel, and it means you'll never miss the next wild Reddit tale we bring to life. Until next time, remember, sometimes the smallest word no can change everything.